I don't think I've said this about any other book in the Bible, but the book of Esther is hilarious. So I've read Esther, I don't know, 2 or 3 times over the course of my lifetime, but up until just a moment ago, I hadn't read it in years, and I had largely forgotten what it was all about. And so, I was kind of curious as to what I would get out of it from rereading it yet again. And boy, oh boy, am I glad that I jumped in and read Esther. It's only 10 chapters, and yet it's one of the most epic books in the Bible. And it also is hilarious from the very beginning to the very end. Every bad thing is flipped on its head, and people that are plotting bad things suddenly have those things happening to them. I mean, it's in the way it's all laid out. Justice is done in the most hilarious fashion. To me, Esther, it's one of my favorite books in the entire Bible. Certainly one of my favorite books in the entirety of the Old Testament. And just for a little background on the book, just in case you haven't read it yourself, you definitely should. Esther is a book that follows immediately after Nehemiah in the Old Testament of the Bible, and even though it immediately follows it, it actually takes place about 30 years before the events of Nehemiah, whenever King Xerxes is the king of Persia, and who can exert his weight over everybody, including the Jews. The story of Esther is, in many ways, it's a story of female empowerment and just kind of female power. Basically what happens is King Xerxes becomes very upset with his own wife and his own queen, and basically expels her from the kingdom. And so he's looking for a new queen. And so he decided to send out messengers and couriers to find the most beautiful women from every province and every nation that he ruled, and bring them to him, and then he would hang out with them for a while and then decide which one would be queen. And Esther, a Jew that he does not know is a Jew, is picked to be a part of that harem, and King Xerxes likes her the best, and she is made queen. And yet he still does not know her Jewish background and the fact that she's one of the she's one of the dirty Jews that is despised by the Persians and other peoples. He doesn't know this, though. And the real crux of the story, the real conflict comes when a certain guy, Haman of Hagabeth, don't ask me to understand how to pronounce these things, okay, people? But Haman, we'll just leave it at that, he is very upset by the fact that Mordecai, a Jew who is related to Esther, won't bend the knee to him, because Mordecai's like, look, dude, I don't bend the knee to anyone except for God. I'm a Jew, that sort of thing. And Haman's very upset about this, and basically goes to the king of Persia, King Xerxes, and basically is like, hey, can you please make a decree that on the 13th day of the 12th month of this year, everybody from every province who is not a Jew will go and kill the Jews? And King Xerxes is like, yeah, sure, whatever, you're a great servant, you're wise, so yeah, sure, let's kill all the Jews. And so, quite literally, Esther is put in a situation where she can either remain a anonymous Jew, an incognito Jew, and just live in prosperity, or she can go out on a limb, just as her relative Mordecai goes out on a limb to save her people. That is Esther in a nutshell. And boy, oh boy, if there is a book in the Bible that hasn't been made into a movie that needs to be made into a movie, it is Esther. And now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump into the more in-depth review and analysis of this book, of the different passages and verses, and just themes and plot points of Esther that I found compelling. So the first instance in Esther that I just found to be unbelievably hilarious was, it came in the first chapter. So Queen Vashti, who is the preceding queen to Queen Esther, was very beautiful, and King Xerxes liked to show her off to the people and show her off to, all the people that he wanted to be loved by. And so he kind of viewed her like some men view cars. He just kind of viewed her as an object to be shown off to people. And, well, she wasn't having that, and so she's like, hey, no, I defy you. I am not going to be made, I'm not going to be objectified by you just for the sake of your own, satisfaction and your pride. Sorry, bro, find someone else. And, well, yeah, he kicks her out. He's basically like, all right, Queen Vashti, I don't want to have anything to do with you. And the reason he does this is because when he consults his wise men, his experts in the matters of law and justice, there's this guy, Memucan, replies in the presence of the king and the nobles, and he describes what Queen Vashti did wrong and why she needs to be banished from the kingdom and replaced by a more proper queen. So I'm just going to go ahead and read Esther chapter 1 verses 16 through 18. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and all the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, and so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of the nobility who have heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There will be no end of disrespect and discord. So basically, the primary reason they wanted to get rid of Queen Vashti is because they were afraid of women. They were afraid of women, speaking up and demanding that they have rights. Gosh, Vashti, she's defiant. We can't have that with the women. It'll set a precedent and an example for all the other women in all the other kingdoms and all the other provinces that witness it and hear about it. We can't have that. We can't have that. What I find so comical about this is that Esther, through being so beautiful as she is, she basically wins the favor of King Xerxes and is able, by the end of the book, as you see, she is able to save her people from Haman and his genocidal decree that was initially put into force by King Xerxes. Not only is she able to do that, but she's also able to just straight up get her relative Mordecai into a position of power. She's able to do so many things in defiance of King Xerxes. And so, oddly enough, this action here at the beginning spurs the antithesis of what was intended. Queen Esther defies King Xerxes by being a strong woman that doesn't back down, that actually says, hey, please revoke your decrees. Actually, hey, instead of hanging Mordecai, how about you, I don't know, hang Haman? And she gets it all done. It's so funny. So the next passage I would like to discuss is Esther chapter 4, verses 9 through 16. Now this passage comes right off the heels of the decree to basically commit genocide against the Jews. And Mordecai, again, Esther's relative, is horrified by this. He rips his clothes in the streets, he's wailing, he's mourning, he's protesting, and Esther gets wind of this. She's so far removed from it, she doesn't understand it, so she sends a messenger, Hathach, to try and find out what's going on with Mordecai. And Mordecai sends Hathach back with this message that I'm about to go and read. And what I find so interesting and powerful is Esther's how Esther responds and how Mordecai argues and how they come to agreement. Hathach went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that he be put to death. The only exception to this is for the king to extend the gold scepter to him and spare his life. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to royal position for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So what do we have here? Initially, Esther is like, man, look, she finds an excuse to be like, hey, Mordecai, I can't do anything. I wish I could, but I can't do anything. Look, I mean, if I do something, I'm going to get killed, do you really want that from me, Mordecai? I mean, come on, bro. And Mordecai calls bullshit on that. Mordecai's like, hey, Esther, do you really think that you're going to be spared? I mean, this is killing of all the Jews. You're a Jew. He'll find out somehow. And then his decree will follow and you will be killed and the Jews will be saved somewhere else, but you will have lost your chance to do what is right. And what I find beautiful is that Esther hears that, and instead of making further excuses, she just realizes that she was wrong in her weakness before and that she has a duty to do. I just find that whole little interaction between the two of them, I don't know, it's just like a testament to bravery, and Esther is like a role model for like women in the Bible. I mean, like, if you look to female figures in the Bible, she is like way up there, if not the queen of them all. I mean, she is a queen, so. Now, before I move on to the next passage, I do have to talk about like just the most hysterical thing in the book of Esther was when Haman was wanting to get Mordecai hanged on a gallows that was 75 feet tall. He built it, and he had great favor at this time with the king Xerxes, and so he goes to the king and thinking that he can ask for whatever he wishes, and he thinks that he'll very easily be able to get rid of Mordecai, who was so disrespectful to him. Well, as it turns out, the king one night couldn't go to sleep, and he examined some records and found that Mordecai had actually been the guy who had saved him from these would-be assassinators from years before. And so what happens is he's like, hey, have we not honored Mordecai for this? Have we not rewarded him for this? And everyone's like, well, no, we haven't actually. And so Haman goes to the king, and the king is like, what should I do for like someone who has honored me the most before out of anyone? And Haman thinks that the king is talking about him, and so he says, parade this man out in front of the people, put him on a horse and put him in fine clothes and let everyone see that he is incredible and blah, 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 blah. And the king, thinking of Mordecai, says, yes, do everything that you just said for Mordecai. And so Haman does all of that stuff for Mordecai in humiliation. He's like, oh gosh, oh, it's all come back to haunt me. Now Mordecai, he's being honored, whereas I'm not honored at all. And then the second banquet that Haman was invited to, in that, Esther says to the king, hey, could you please do away with Haman? He's the guy who wants to kill all of my people. Please, you say that you'll do anything I ask, so please kill him. And so now the King Xerxes, takes Haman and hangs him on the gallows that Haman had built for Mordecai. Karma. Now, the next thing I would really love to talk about is the edict. So the initial edict, which was to exterminate the Jews, that had the force of King Xerxes, and basically those kinds of decrees and edicts that the king commits to cannot be revoked. He says that, in fact, in the book of Esther. And since they can't be revoked, still, even though Haman is dead, it's still law that the people from all the provinces and from all the nationalities and from all the different parts of King Xerxes, his ruling lands, they still have to, on the 13th day of the 12th month, exterminate the Jews. And so this is kind of a horrible situation for Esther and Mordecai and all the Jews. So what Esther does is she goes to the king and is like, hey, I realize you can't revoke this thing, but hey, how about you give the Jews the right to fight and destroy and defend to fight and destroy their enemies and defend themselves from their enemies on this day. If you give us this right, then we'll take it from there. And so King Xerxes makes a new decree basically saying the Jews can attack and kill anyone that tries to attack and kill them, and they can do it without consequences on the 13th day of the 12th month. And so what ends up happening is there is, on the 13th day of the 12th month, a giant kind of like clashing and a little bit of a war where basically the Jews kill, and they win because God's on their side. That's the whole idea. They kill anyone and everyone that tries to kill them. And what's interesting is they didn't take any of their plunder. The Jews didn't, anyways. The Jews did not take any of the plunder of the people that they attacked and defended themselves from. And I find that really interesting. It shows that the Jews, they did not take this as an opportunity to exploit this decree. In one short little passage I would like to read and discuss immediately before this whole actual war began is Esther chapter 8 verses 16 and 17. Now this passage is coming right after the decree that Mordecai had gotten passed through King Xerxes and with the help of Esther. And so the Jews are, it says in verse 16, "For the Jews it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city, wherever the edict of the king went, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them." Now, the part of that passage that I think is worth discussing is the part where it says, "And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them." Now, if you remember in my review of Nehemiah, there was a part where I talked about one passage where it said, basically, Nehemiah, with the other leaders, they basically decreed, like, Jews do not marry people of foreign descent, do not associate with them, all that stuff. And I made the point then saying I don't really think this has anything to do with race, because pretty much everybody in that area was ethnically similar. And also throughout the Bible and other parts of the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, it is made clear that people, Jews, are supposed to be accepting of aliens and outsiders. So I was like, that doesn't make any sense for it to quite literally, for it to be a race thing. It must be have something more to do with foreign customs and practices. And that's, in context, really what I think it's all about, because those were the things that actually corrupted the Jews, not interracial marriage. And I think right here where it says, "And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them," that right there to me proves just exactly what I just described, which is that race is not a problem. It's culture, customs, practices, the worshiping of idols over worshiping the God of the Jews. It's those differences that Nehemiah forbade, and that the Jews, basically outlawed. You could still, though, marry people and associate with people who were, who didn't look like you or that were from somewhere else. That's at least what I get out of it, and I think context in the Bible kind of proves that. And another thing I found fascinating about the book of Esther is that it is basically an origin story for the Jewish holiday that is Purim. I did not know that. And so it's really, really neat. I overall like Esther, as I said, like it's one of my favorite books in the Bible, certainly one of my favorite books in the Old Testament of the Bible. And I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. But if you have read it already, I want to know what you thought of it. Please leave any comments or questions you have in the comment section below, and just let me know what you thought of Esther. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and never forget to